Today, I'm going to show you how to use a baitcaster. So you just bought your first baitcaster. And if you're anything like me, you've been fishing with either spinning gear or closed reel spin cast combos for most of your life. In this video, I'm going to show you how to rig, tune, and cast your very first baitcaster. Before we get into the nitty-gritty, I'm going to show you the pros and cons of using a setup just like this one. Now, one of the first pros of using a baitcaster is you can rig it up with super heavy line. This is a 30-pound test. It is just straight braid, and you can also rig it up with heavier lures, such as this topwater frog. Since you can use this heavier line and heavier lures, it means that you can run it through tougher vegetation, such as these reeds right in front of me. Another pro of using baitcasters is you have a lot more accuracy with these long rods for when you want to pitch your lure, or when you want to flip your lure into a very specific area. A final pro for using a baitcaster such as this Bass Pro Shops formula is that the baitcaster reels are often rated to be much stronger than the spinning reel or spin cast reel counterparts. Now, some cons of using a baitcaster are the dreaded backlash, which, as you can see, that was a pretty bad one. But with the right settings, you can do all you can to minimize this problem, and I will show you that later in the video. Another con is that these bait casting combos can get rather expensive as compared to a lot of the spinning gear and spin cast combos that you can find at your local retailers. One final con about baitcasters is that they do have a bit of a steep learning curve, but because of this video, you'll soon be casting like that in no time. So here we have our basic standard baitcaster reel. So what we have here is the star drag right here, the reel handle. This is what you use to get your line back on the spool. You have your little eye guide right here that you run your line through so that when you reel it in, it sits on the spool nicely. And then that brings us to the spool itself. Right now I have 30-pound Power Pro braid on in the green color, and all those things can be found to some degree on a spinning combo, but the two things that are not found on a spinning combo that are found on this baitcaster are these magnetic brakes on the side and this tensioner knob here. Over here are the magnetic brakes, so when your spool is in the air and after you have casted, the line is going out, this controls how much or how little the spool will slow down or speed up. I like to keep this setting between 7 and 6, so I'd say about 6.5. That seems to be the sweet spot for this setup. Now that you know the pros and cons of using a baitcaster, I will now show you how to rig your very own baitcaster with line, backing, and a lure. So the first thing you want to do is simply just run your main end through all of your little eyelets here. As you can see, I've already done that. It's pretty straightforward, very self-explanatory, as you would with any other type of fishing rod. Next, something you don't want to forget is to run your line through this little guide here, which will ensure that your line lays on your spool evenly and will not cause giant knots when you are reeling in your line. So once you have this, then you can just use one of these little holes here to wrap your line around the spool of the reel. So all you have to do is just put your line in one of those holes, and then you can just reel, and then that will bring it around. So now your line is wrapped around your spool there. Now that you have your line around your spool, I will now show you how to tie an arbor knot, which is great for attaching line to spools or bails that you would have on a spinning combo. So the first thing you want to do is take your tag end line here and just do a simple overhand knot like so, and you can also trim off some of that tag end. We will not be needing that. So from this point you have your main line here and your tag end line here with your overhand knot. So what you want to do, create a loop in your main line here, and then run your tag end line through that loop, and then just tie another overhand knot with your tag end line, like so. So now you have an overhand knot here, a loop, and then all you have to do now is just pull the whole shebang tight, kind of walk it on that spool. And eventually you'll end up with a nice snug knot on your spool. From this point, be sure to maintain tension with your other hand, and then you can just start reeling up your backing onto your line, onto your spool rather. And I usually go until the initial knot is covered. That should be plenty of backing. You don't really need too much, but it's better to have more than to have less. Now I will show you how to connect your monofilament 10-pound backing to your main line, which is a 30-pound braid for me. This is just Power Pro, no matter what, 30-pound braid. So in order to tie a blood knot, which is my favorite knot to use to do this sort of thing, you want to cross your lines here and then kind of just wrap in opposite directions for about 7 to 10 wraps. There we go, that should be plenty of wraps. So now all you gotta do is find a little opening in the middle of these wraps and then run the monofilament through the top of the opening and then the braid through the bottom of the opening, and then just pull it tight. So I will do that now. The mono going in through the top and the braid going in through the bottom. Now we have something that looks like this, almost like a figure 8 type deal. Now I do like to wet most of my knots, so I'll just get a little bit of spit from my hands and just kind of wet this knot. Then all you have to do from here is just pull all the lines together. You can use your thumbnail to kind of persuade it to go a little closer together. Then boom, you have yourselves a nice strong blood knot that isn't going anywhere. From here, you can just trim off your tag ends. I do need new braid cutters, so please bear with me. Hey, that went pretty well. But as you can see, a nice little blood knot that is as strong as can be. From this point, all you have to do, once again, maintain tension up here, and then just reel in your line until you hit that braid, which I just did. You see that sitting on your reel nicely. One important detail to remember when stringing up your rod, make sure that your line is run through that little reciprocating eyelet right there, and it is run above that safety bar right there. Hopefully y'all can see that my line is indeed above that bar. Now I will show you how to tie on your lure. For this demonstration, I have this little topwater frog here. It's very easy to tie on. Simply run your line through this little hook eye there. And this is called a Palomar knot, one of the strongest knots in fishing. So pair it up on this 30-pound braid. You can almost guarantee that your line won't be the problem. So after you run it through, simply run it back through, same eye of the hook. And then with both double strands, simply tie an overhand knot. You've created this little loop here, then run your lure, or in this case the frog, through that little loop. And all you have to do from here is just wet it a little bit. There we go. And then just pull it tight. There you go. And from this point, all you have to do, just trim off your little tag end here. And you are ready to rock and roll and get to fishing. So if you're a beginner and just learning how to tune a baitcaster, all you have to do is tighten this tensioner knob until your lure just barely slides down, and then go until it doesn't anymore. So what that looks like from the reel is depress that and then slowly bring the tensioner knob towards yourself until your spool starts spinning, and then go maybe 1/8 of an inch to a 1/16 of an inch. That way it will minimize your chance of backlash and maximize your line distance, at least until you get the hang of using a baitcaster. Now, as you get more proficient with using a baitcaster, you can dial that knob back further so that your lure drops super quickly, and that will give you that added casting distance. But as I said before, baitcasters do have a very steep learning curve, so until you get the hang of it, try to stick with a tighter tension that will minimize your chances of backlash. One important thing to keep in mind when you're tuning your baitcaster is that each individual lure will weigh differently and therefore will drop your spool at different rates. So you do have to adjust your spool and your tensioner every single time you change lures, which is a part of that learning curve, because this topwater frog may be lighter and or heavier than something else you might throw on. And if you do not adjust the tensioner knob, you will increase your likelihood of having a backlash, which will be another problem entirely. So let's say you adjusted all your settings to the correct spot, put your magnetic brakes on 6.5, and but you did forget to change your spool tensioner after you changed a lure, and that resulted in this little backlash here. So I will now show you how to undo this backlash. As you can see, I'm pulling on the main line and nothing is happening. So what you have to do is with your thumb, pull it up to where the backlash is occurring and simply pull. It's usually going to be in the form of this little loopy thing that's catching the main line. Then from there, you just have to pull your main line until you find another one of those loops, grab it, and just thread it up, and just keep repeating that process over and over again until you eventually get the backlash out. I think this should be my last little loop here, and before long you will have your backlash out and good to go. Now, there are some instances where the backlash is a little too strong, and it's better off to just cut your line, cut your losses, and just re-rig. Now that you have your baitcaster rigged and all the settings tuned to the right places, I'm going to show you how to cast this bad boy. So the first thing you want to do is with your thumb, hold the spool here and then click it, the release down here, click it down, and then leave about probably 4 or 5 inches of line out between the rod tip and your lure. Then you want to swing your rod back and then just flick it forward in a casting motion. You can thumb it a little bit for some more control, but your settings should be tuned so that this bird's nest does not happen. An important thing to remember when casting a baitcaster that I just did not do, hence why the bird's nest occurred, is that when your lure hits the water or is close to hitting the water, put your thumb on the spool to stop it quickly, because that's how backlashes and bird's nest result. One more time, and then hit the water, boom, stop it, and there you can see no bird's nest, and I don't believe I even needed to thumb the spool. Now you know how to rig, tune, and cast your very first baitcaster. If you would like to see more tutorials from the channel just like this one, please let me know what you would like to see down in the comments below. And as always, thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.